The clink of cutlery against porcelain should have been comforting, but tonight it felt like the ticking of a time bomb. The dining table was set perfectly, crystal glasses catching the warm light, plates positioned with care, candles flickering, like nervous hearts. On the surface, it looked like the perfect family dinner. But beneath it all, words had been waiting for months, maybe years, to spill out. Maya sat at the far end of the table, her fingers wrapped tightly around her. Fork, she wasn't hungry. She had been dreading this evening since her mother's call earlier in the week. It's been too long. We need to sit together as a family again. That word family used to mean comfort. Now it felt more like a test she wasn't prepared for. Across from her, her brother, Daniel, was scrolling through his phone, pretending to check messages but really avoiding eye contact. He hadn't spoken to Maya properly in nearly a year, not since the argument about the business and the betrayal she couldn't forget. Their mother, Evelyn, noticed the tension but said nothing. She had mastered the art of smiling through. Cracks in the glass. The kitchen door swung open, and Thomas, their father, stepped in with the roast. He was a man of few words, but his silence tonight was heavier than usual. He placed the dish in the center of the table and took his seat without looking at anyone. The air was thick. Conversation had to happen, but no one wanted to be the one to start it. So, Evelyn said finally, forcing a cheerfulness that didn't belong. Daniel, how's work? Daniel glanced up, giving the briefest smile. Busy, good. His answer was clipped. His eyes flicked toward Maya just for a second, then back to his plate. Maya stabbed her fork into her salad, not because she wanted it, but because it was something to do. Evelyn tried again. And Maya, still painting? Maya's lips curved into a faint, polite smile. Sometimes. She didn't want to say more. She knew if she started talking, the truth might slip out, that her creativity had been drained ever since that night. There was a pause, the kind of pause that stretched until you could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. Then Daniel broke it, his tone sharper than the knife in his hand. You still blaming me for everything? Maya froze. Evelyn's hand tightened around her wine glass. Thomas shifted in his seat but said nothing. The fight wasn't supposed to start this soon, but the first crack had just appeared in the dam. The room seemed to shrink after Daniel's words. The candlelight no longer felt warm. It cast shadows like silent witnesses on the walls. Maya slowly put her fork down. Her voice was low, steady, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. I'm not blaming you for everything, Daniel. Just the things you actually did. Daniel let out a sharp laugh, not one of amusement, but disbelief. Right, because in your world, you're always the victim. Evelyn jumped in quickly, her tone sharp but trembling at the edges. That's enough. We're here to eat, not drag up the past. But the past was already sitting at the table. It had been there before the roast was in the oven, before the candles were lit. It was in the way Daniel avoided eye contact, in the stiffness of Maya's shoulders, in the hollow sound of Evelyn's laughter. Maya's eyes didn't leave Daniel. You sold my work without asking me. Do you know what that did to me? That wasn't just art. That was months of my life. It was... She paused, her throat tightening. Me. Daniel leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. It was collecting dust in your studio. You weren't doing anything with it. I was trying to help. Help. Maya's voice cracked, then rose. You took the only thing I left after? She stopped herself. Her gaze dropped to the table. The words that wanted to follow were too raw for this room. Evelyn's fingers drummed nervously against her glass. Maya. She began softly, but Thomas finally spoke for the first time, his voice deep and slow. You both need to stop. It should have carried authority, but it didn't. There was no fire behind it, only weariness. The kind of weariness that comes from watching the same storm roll in year after year. Daniel's eyes flicked toward his father. You always take her side. I don't take sides, Thomas said, though his gaze lingered on Maya a fraction too long. The air was thick now, heavy with words unsaid. Somewhere in the house, the old grandfather clock began to chime. Each strike felt like another second running out before something irreversible would be said. Maya pushed her plate away, untouched. Maybe I should go. Evelyn reached out quickly, her hand on Maya's arm. No, please, we can talk. But the truth was, no one was talking. They were circling, waiting, testing the strength of the last. Threads holding them together. Maya stood halfway up from her chair, but Daniel's voice stopped her. Go ahead, run. That's what you do best. Her hands curled into fists at her. Besides, you have no idea what I've had to run from. Daniel pushed his plate forward, his voice sharper now, cutting through the quiet clinking of cutlery. Oh, please. You think you're the only one who's been hurt in this family? You think I didn't lose anything when Dad... Don't, Thomas interrupted, his tone suddenly firm. Not tonight. But Daniel wasn't listening anymore. His jaw was tight, eyes locked on Maya like she was the only person in the room. You left. You abandoned all of us, and now you come back and pretend like you're some wounded saint? You didn't even... I left, Maya cut in, her voice trembling with anger, because no one here cared enough to see what was happening to me. I was drowning, Daniel, and you, she pointed at him, then at Evelyn and Thomas. All of you just watched. Evelyn's voice cracked. That's not true. I tried. You tried when it was convenient. Maya's eyes glistened. Now, and her voice faltered. You only saw me when I smiled. When I broke, you looked away. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the clock seemed to hesitate before its next tick. Daniel slammed his hand on the table, rattling the glasses. And you think I had it any easier? I had to be the one holding everything together while you disappeared. I had to hold it together. Maya's laugh was bitter. You sold my work. You sold pieces of me. That's not holding things together, Daniel. That's tearing them apart. Thomas leaned forward now, his voice low but shaking. Both of you stop. You're not hearing each other. But they couldn't stop. Years of silence had finally found an opening, and the words were spilling too fast to catch. Evelyn's hands trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Please, please, can we not do this here? Maya turned toward her, her voice soft now, almost breaking. Where else, Mom? When else? Evelyn looked down. She didn't have an answer. The candles flickered as if disturbed by an invisible gust. And in that fragile, breathless moment, everyone realized this wasn't just a dinner anymore. This was a reckoning. The air in the dining room felt heavier. Now, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen, Daniel's breathing was ragged. Maya's hands were still trembling over the tablecloth. Evelyn was staring into her untouched glass of wine, while Thomas looked like he was bracing for impact. Daniel's voice cut through the silence. Fine, you want the truth? Let's talk about why you really left. Maya's eyes narrowed, careful. He leaned forward, almost daring her. It wasn't just because you were drowning. You were running from him, weren't you? The fork slipped from Evelyn's hand and clattered onto her plate. Daniel, that's enough. But Daniel didn't stop. That boyfriend you had, what was his name? Eric? The one we warned you about? You wouldn't listen, and when it all went to hell, you didn't come to us. You didn't come home. You stop. Maya's voice cracked so loud that it startled even her. Her face flushed, her eyes sharp and wet. You don't get to talk about him. You don't get to talk about what he did. Daniel froze, but Maya didn't. You think you know what happened? You think you have any idea what it's like to be trapped in a room with someone who makes you believe your life isn't yours anymore. To feel your own voice get smaller and smaller until it's gone. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, tears pooling. Maya. And the worst part, Maya continued, her voice trembling, was not him. It was knowing that if I called, if I came here, I'd hear the same thing I heard when I was 16 and begged to leave. You're overreacting. Her words landed like stones. Thomas's eyes closed for a moment. Evelyn looked like she'd been punched. Daniel sat back, silent now, but his jaw was still clenched. Maya's voice softened, almost to a whisper. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to choose between surviving and staying with a family that refused to see me. For the first time that night, no one moved. The candles burned low, casting shadows that made everyone's faces look older, worn down by years they'd never spoken about. Finally, Evelyn reached across the table, her hand shaking. I see you now. But Maya didn't take her hand. Not yet. The candles burned down the stubs as the four of them sat in the dim light, words replaced by the soft, uneven sound of breathing, and though the table still held the remains of a ruined meal somewhere between the broken glass and spilled wine. A fragile thread had been tied back together. For the first time in years, it felt like they might learn to sit at the same table again.